Okay. Okay, welcome. Welcome to our webinar. I think a lot of people has already joined. We have a webinar on an exciting topic, ChatGPT3 in equity research and analytics. It's basically ChatGPT3 is a groundbreaking language model based on the GPT 3.5 architecture and developed by OpenAI. And I think it's kind of it is being set apart from different AI tools because it can provide not only accurate, but really creative and thought-provoking answers. So while you're still joining, I would like to say that this meeting is being recorded. And I'm going to be the moderator today. My name is Katerina Harchenko. I am CFA charter holder, PhD in international finance, and working as lead product owner at SimCorp Ukraine, helping to design and develop investment management software for leading financial institutions. Like SimCorp Dimension platform is our application, and around 30 trillion assets. Euro assets are managed using this platform. And of course, I'm also interested in ChatGPT, and we are in the company discussing how we can use it in our software. Today, we are going to delve into capabilities of ChatGPT3 and discuss basically what is it, the architecture. Maybe we assume that you know quite a bit of it. So it's going to be a general overview. We'll talk about the learning process, very practical use cases, and some of the pitfalls. All this in a sum will give you the opportunity to unlock the full potential of ChatGPT3. And of course, we are excited to have a special speaker to guide us through this informative session and meet Carlos Salas. I will pin him here now. He is CFA charter holder, CQF, FCA regulated portfolio manager, data scientist, lecturer with experience and verifiable track record. Currently involved as freelance investment advisor and research consultant on investment projects. Carlos is deeply committed to educational and research initiatives within the investment industry, and he has been actively involved in several influential projects. So including advising the University of London on data science and machine learning courses and providing insights to ISB, IFRS Foundation and new accounting standards. And I'm pretty sure we can also name a lot more of achievements by Carlos, but I think you're interested to know what Carlos Salas is thinking about the ChatGPT and what he is going to present for you today. And I decided to ask ChatGPT about it. Yeah. So what does Carlos Salas think about the ChatGPT? And you can see the answer here. So it seems he didn't publicly express his opinion, or ChatGPT can't give the accurate answer, but I think there is a good suggestion here. Reach out to Carlos directly to know his current thoughts. So Carlos, welcome. And we are sure that you will equip us with all the necessary knowledge to start using or improve use of ChatGPT3. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. Let me know if I shall now. Okay, so I will share my screen for all of you. And thank you very much for that kind of introduction. Very nice to ask ChatGPT about me. Luckily, I'm not in the database, so it doesn't know anything about me. Let me see. I am going to be sharing the screen number 2. Hopefully you can see it. Otherwise, please let me know in the chat. Okay. And I'm more than happy to check in the chat if there's any particular problem with the streaming. And from my side, I have nothing else to complement what Katrina said about me. I have more than 15 years experience in the buy side. Probably my equity asset class of expertise is equities, okay? Long only and long short equity mandates. And probably my main expertise is to blend traditional investment methods with state-of-the-art machine learning and quantitative methods. Okay, for me, it's all about blending those two disciplines. I don't consider myself a pure quant or a pure fundamental investor. I would like to think of myself as something in the middle. Okay, I'm gonna be like splitting the presentation in two main parts. The first part is gonna be a little bit about overview of LLM models, particularly finance domain specific models. We are in the early days, so I expect to give you key takeaways, and I crunch some numbers as well about the economics of training a model and the economics of using a model for specific cases that I'm gonna try to convey what are a range of operating expenditures that you can expect if you want to run, for instance, ChatGPT to conduct analysis on conference call transcripts. Okay. Then we're going to jump into the second part, which is going to be more practical. I'm going to be discussing two main tasks that we can run with ChatGPT. One is sentiment analysis of news, and the other one is qualitative analysis. Particularly, I'm going to be focusing on PESTEL analysis. And that's it. And hopefully, we're going to have enough time at the end for some Q&A. And I'm more than happy to get your questions. Feel free to start writing questions in the chat so that I think that we can gather all of them. And later, I think Katerina can start basically give me some of the questions that makes more sense so that we can save a lot of time. So let's get started. I wanted to simply give you a very first slide because I want to make clear that we haven't come up with things like GPT models or BERT models over the last 10 years or 15 years only. Natural language processing, NLP, dates back to the 50s when we started with rule-based systems for language translation. And some other authors later in the 60s, they started applying statistical models for NLP purposes. And the big leap forward was in the 80s with the design of the first machine learning algorithms for NLP purposes. I'm talking about decision trees, neural networks, and SVMs. What was the problem at the time? That the authors, the researchers didn't have the computer power necessary to run experiments. So there was a lot of the theory behind what we were talking about today, but there was no way to build a machine that could replicate and could actually prove that those theories were going to be working. No. Later in the 90s, we have the digital boom, a lot of text data created in online. And later on, as we go into the early 2000s, we have the rise of deep learning with CNNs, RNNs, and LSTMs becoming a brand new discipline within the machine learning space. And it wasn't until the 2010s, especially the last 10, 13 years, where actually all the theory that we have been learning since the 1950s and all the algorithms developed over the last 20th century have been able to be put into experimentation. That's when we have entered transformer models with the BERT model. BAS1 introduced the transformer architecture model BERT that was outperforming recurrent neural networks models. Okay, and it was in 2019 when the FinBERT, a finance domain specific model, was introduced for finance specific tasks like news sentiment analysis or whole conference call transcript sentiment analysis, to say some of them. Okay, and then we go into the last 3-4 years with the age of LLMs, large language models. So large language models they follow the same philosophy of BERT models because they have the same philosophy of transformer architecture, sort of neural network. Nevertheless, they are based on two pillars, two main stages, pre-training and fine-tuning. Okay, and for instance, GPT, the main difference, we're going to see some difference later. I'm going to be putting a comparison of models, but to give you an idea, BERT models, they were based in less than 100 million of parameters, whereas when we are talking about the vanilla GPT model, we are talking about more than 175 billion parameters. Okay, that's why we call them large language models. It's not only because of the large data training sets that they are using, which is huge, but especially because of the large number of parameters. And that was a little bit about the history lesson on NLP. What about the last 4 years? I also wanted to provide another slide with a timeline of the last 4 years focus only on LLMs. And it's because I wanted to also make clear something, that large language models is not all about ChatGPT, okay? There are many other models out there, as you can see in this map, that goes from 2019 to 2023. There are many private and public organizations working on their own domain-specific models. And it is true that ChatGPT has been the one cultivating popular thinking, the popular culture, because it's a very flexible, and in terms of when asked generic questions, it can really reply with a very coherent answer. Nevertheless, there are other large language models that are very specific for a particular task that cannot perform ChatGPT. Last but not least, BART, which is the initiative of Google to counter Microsoft OpenAI GPT models. Okay, even though Google hasn't been as quickly releasing news about BART, but 100% I'm sure that it's going to come up with something within the next month that is going to probably shock us again. And that was, I wanted to talk about a little bit of the models, and the difference between these models is not only about the different transformer architecture that they can have, that they are different in terms of the different layers they're using or different architecture behind. It also is, but they are particularly different about the data training they are using. If you pay attention here in the middle, GPT-3, for instance, uses 84% of the data training sets are web pages, and only 16% comes from books and news, text. Nevertheless, if we pay attention to other large language models like the well-known Chinchilla, we can see that websites only make 56% of the data training set. 40% of the data training set comes from books and news and articles. And the other 4% comes from code snippets from websites like Stack Overflow and so on. So as you can see, when we are comparing different large language models, it's not only about the architecture that is behind those models and the way they are trained and cross-validated, but also the kind of data that they have been using, okay? And now let's focus. I've been talking very top level of LLMs. Let's focus more on our field, of interest, finance, particularly investments, And I want to show you this table that you can read from the left to the right in order to understand the evolution of NLP models. And I'm going to give you a little bit of my experience in this particular stage. It was 2011 when I started using Python in my workflow. Particularly, I was using the NLTK NLP library from Python. Okay, I created a program that was able, using a rule-based methodology and the law from McDonald dictionary, finance dictionary, I was able to basically analyze, run sentiment analysis of news for the universe of stocks I was screening on a monthly basis. Okay, therefore, from 2011 to 2015, I realized that those signals were enhancing my earnings and price momentum indicators. So it was a very nice weapon to add into your arsenal. Now, what happened as we go forward into 2015, the second half of the 2010s decade, I realized that those signals, they were becoming a staple, that they were no longer giving me an edge. Okay, why? Because more and more people start learning about Python, NLTK, and also there are more alternative data vendors offering NLP signals that were much more sophisticated than that particular model I had in-house. Okay, we had the other milestone in 2019 with Finbird, which I named before, which also is based on a transformer architecture, and with 107 million parameters. That was quite a leap forward from rule-based models, which are only based on very simplistic rules within. Finbird was able to factor context, for instance. So that was giving him quite much more explanatory power and predictive power than my initial models. So since from 2019, I shifted my focus towards more BERT-based models, particularly Finbird, and then we arrived to nowadays. So with GPT models, Bloomberg came a couple of months ago with its own Bloomberg GPT model, which is using, as you can see in the last column, is using 50%, 51.2% financially specific data sets owned by Bloomberg. and 48.8%, no? 50-50 of generalistic information, and 50% of the finance-specific text, no? So it's a task-specific GPT model, and it is supposed to outperform a vanilla GPT model, okay? That said, if you have curiosity, I encourage you to read the Bloomberg white paper. It gives quite a lot of information about the way they train the model and the architecture, and even how much time it cost them to train. I think it was like a couple of months. And I use that information to crunch some numbers I'm going to show you later. But bottom line, in order to train that kind of a model, it takes 15 times the resources, okay, of a Finberg model. That tells you everything you need to know. And on top of that, also, GPT models come with other stumbling blocks, like, for instance, a look ahead bias risk I'm going to be talking about later, and the training cost time that I mentioned just 1 minute before. Okay, so let's continue, because I wanted to give you this slide as a way of preparing the field so that you know where we come from and where we're heading for. Somebody asked me, did you stop using the Law from McDonald rule-based models? And I answered that I use it as a sort of a yardstick, as a benchmark, okay? So there's no point in using a very sophisticated machine learning model for sentiment analysis that is not able to outperform a rule-based model, because so for me, the way I'm using Law from McDonald right now is as a benchmark, okay? I used to use it 13 years ago as the flagship, no, and nowadays for me it's a benchmark. Okay, good. Let's continue, and let's talk about, before we go into usage cases, I want to talk about how much does it cost? What are the economics of training and using this kind of GPT models? For instance, if you pay attention to the vanilla OpenAI GPT model, the estimation is around $4 to $5 million to train it only once, okay? And it took, I don't know how many months, okay, for this model to be trained completely. Now, I was using the Bloomberg white paper for their Bloomberg GPT model, which is a finance domain-specific sort of model, which is what we are interested. It's only 50 billion parameters, which you could think, okay, why is the Bloomberg GPT model have 3 times less parameters than the vanilla GPT model? It's because it's trained with less data and finance-specific data. So just for the sake of understanding, not because a model has more parameters, it's going to be more robust, okay? But anyway, so I crunched some numbers using the information from that Bloomberg white paper and the information publicly available from cloud providers like Amazon Web Services of Microsoft's Azure. And it turns out that if we want to retrain our model or in-house, imagine we are training this finance-specific model in-house, we were probably talking about spending between $1 and $2 million, okay, 1.2, $1.8 million. Now, you will agree with me that very few asset managers are going to be able to conduct proprietary research of large language models. No? Only the big ones, the big guys, talking about the BlackRocks, I'm talking about the Renaissance and all these kind of big players are only going to be the only ones running R&D of models in-house. Okay, does it mean that we, as investment management analysts and portfolio managers, are not going to be able to access this tool on a programmatic way? No, in fact, I was crunching very similar numbers, looking at the vanilla GPT model from OpenAI. No, you can check in the website what is the cost of one prompt and the response of that prompt. And just for the record, that with a budget of $100, you can use ChatGPT to analyze almost 4 million words. If we bear in mind that the average conference call transcript is around 7,000 words, which is around 5,000 and something tokens, okay? Every token, every word is like 0.75 tokens, okay, in natural language processing. That's an estimate, by the way. So I came out with an exercise, no? So what happens if I want to run ChatGPT prompts programmatically for a universe of 6,000 stocks, assuming that those stocks are reporting on a quarterly basis? So I'm going to have four quarters, 4 conference call transcripts to analyze per stock for 6,000 stocks. So I was like, working out along with the OpenAI prices that are publicly available. And it turns out that the cost of running conference call transcript and sentiment analysis for those 6,000 stocks in 1 year can range between $4,000 and $12,000. Okay, why that range $4,000 to $12,000? Because if you pay attention to the start here, the $4,000 cost would be if we are only running the conference call transcript analysis of the Q&A section part. But if we want to run of the whole document, we will go to $12,000. Okay. Now, probably you're thinking, wow, but this is not as expensive as I thought. Yes and no, because at the end of the day, these are only the cost of the calls to OpenAI. But what happens with the infrastructure that you need, the database management that you need to have in-house? What happens with the machine learning operations part? No, I need also to have an environment to work with, machine learning Azure or Amazon Web Services. That also is going to come with a cost. What happens with the people that I need to manage all that workflow? Machine learning engineers, a data engineer, a data scientist. Those are things that you need to incorporate, no, when you are taking this kind of decisions, no, of investing in data science and machine learning initiatives, no, research initiatives, no. But in any case, also something very important. Bear in mind that this 12,000 maximum cost is an estimate of mine, but it's only conference call transcript analysis. What if I want to analyze for those 6,000 stocks all the news that happens in 1 week for 52 weeks or 1 year? You'll see I'm going to have many more calls. So I was also running a rough estimate that if I want to add new sentiment analysis running ChatGPT plus conference call transcript analysis plus filing 10Ks or 10Qs or whatever analysis, it can go well above 25 to 50K per month. Okay, $25,000 to $50,000 per month, depending on the intensity that you are using ChatGPT. So yes, it can be cheap depending on your degree of usage, and the higher the frequency of your trading and your investment horizon, the more expensive it's going to be for sure. Yeah, good. So I just want to be sure about this because that was the first part of my presentation. I want to be first setting up the building blocks so that we are aware of where are we coming from in terms of NLP models. What are the economics of building up a large language model R&D department in our company? It's not for everybody. You have to have quite a sizable amount of assets under management. Luckily for us, we can still use the models that are already pre-trained for us. Bloomberg GPT model is not, I think, as far as I'm concerned, because this moves very quickly. I don't think it's still available for investors. Bloomberg released a white paper this year. At the end of the white paper you read, they are extremely concerned that if they allow you to have access, they can have privacy problems because they are using an internal database to feed the program. So there are a lot of barriers there. I think that Bloomberg is going to spend a lot of time, and other data vendors are going to spend a lot of time this year to train a very good model, but also especially try to provide a very user-friendly experience of ChatGPT, not only for people that are engineers that have coding skills, but also to the average finance users, average equity analysts that don't have coding skills. Okay. And let's continue. So let's jump into the second part of my presentation. I want to talk especially about, sometimes people ask me, I don't know, Carlos, when I'm able to, or if I should or not use ChatGPT, because I've heard that a lot of dangers and risks, and I don't want to be fired, no? Basically, no? That's one area of concern. So I always recommend this kind of framework because I think it can help you a lot to really clear your mindset. Now, when you are a private banker, we're going to see it, no? We're going to see that there are more risks than when you are an equity research analyst that uses that research for internal purposes, okay? So let's get started. First question you need to ask yourself is, does the task require accurate output? If that's the case, please don't use it. If that's not the case, you can still use it. Let's see the next question. Can ChatGPT answers be verified? If you don't have anybody that can verify the output of ChatGPT, you better don't use it. If you have somebody that can verify that output, or you manage to find a way to double check programmatically that output, okay, like for sentiment analysis scores, for instance, then we can go that way and it can make sense, okay? Now, will sensitive data be inputted? That's the next question in this circuit, in this framework. If you are a private banker and you are using client-sensitive information, personal information as the prompt, there's a risk of privacy breach, okay? That's a reason why countries like Italy have banned the usage of ChatGPT. And if you are working for a private organization, you better don't input in the prompt confidential information or client-sensitive information, because there are some inherent risks. If that's not the case, like I think that most of the people that are attending this seminar, we are only going to be inputting news, conference call transcripts, things like that. That's publicly available information. So that shouldn't be a problem in terms of legality or, okay? Now, if we are going in terms of privacy, sorry. Now, next question, will the output be monetized directly? Imagine that we are a fintech company. We have our own way of analyzing ChatGPT or process, and we provide signals, no? If we sell those signals, there's a big loophole yet, okay? So probably you have seen the news today with OpenAI CEO testimony in front of the Congress of the US, asking to regulate the police regulators and things like that, because there's a huge legal loophole, not only in the US, but everywhere. So before you take any decision, before you monetize your product using ChatGPT, you really need to get legal advice from professionals, okay? If that's not the case, in my case, it's all about using ChatGPT for internal research purposes. I'm not going to monetize anything from the output of ChatGPT straight away. ChatGPT output for me, it's only going to be an ingredient into my whole investment process. So that's not you are never going to have a problem with that, a legal problem. Great. So let's continue. This is like about tips about how to identify appropriate usage. In the next one, let's focus more and more into what we start with top level. Let's go and focus more bottom up equity research uses, no? And I try to come out, this comes risk ranking. I try to rank from more reliable to less reliable. I include all the equity research tasks or a description of the most of the tasks that we are conducting when we are analyzing a company, no, for due diligence, no. And we have things like business description, fundamental analysis, valuation, sentiment analysis, and so on, no. I try to rank using what the information that we know, limitations of ChatGPT. So we know that ChatGPT output reliability hinges on three main pillars, okay? The degree of reliance on objective data is one of them. The other pillar is the subjectivity and the interpretation of the task. And the third pillar are the ChatGPT limitations by themselves, okay? Which we're going to be discussing in the next slides. But what I did is to try to give you a ranking of what are the tasks you can rely more on ChatGPT to give you an accurate output without risk, and what are the other tasks where probably human supervision is going to play also a more important role. Now, that doesn't mean that the tasks here at the bottom are the output from ChatGPT is completely rubbish. No, I'm simply telling you that probably they're going to require high degree of overseeing than the ones at the above. Okay. Good. Let's get started. So I'm going to be, I cannot focus on all of them. So I decided to focus only on SWOT and PESTEL, particularly only PESTEL for this particular presentation, and the sentiment analysis of news. Okay. So let's carry on. So for the sentiment, I'm going to start by the one that is not less reliable, but we can have many, or we can have many more doubts in terms of relying on ChatGPT for this particular task at the moment, which is sentiment analysis of news. And then I'm going to come out with a research, which, as you can imagine, there's not plenty of research backing up the usage of ChatGPT for sentiment of news analysis and backtesting of this kind of usage of the model. But I came out with this Lopez Lira and Tang research from early 2023. They are running news sentiment analysis to predict daily stock returns. They are using data from news headlines from Ravenpack from September 2021 to December 2022. And they do this for US equities. What they do is to programmatically, they ask ChatGPT. They are using, by the way, vanilla ChatGPT, not a finance domain specific ChatGPT. And they are asking this prompt, okay, to the computer. So they are inserting here a headline of news, and they are asking, please pretend you are a financial expert. You are a financial expert with a store recommendation experience. Answer yes if the next headline is good news, no if it's bad news, and unknown if it's basically somewhere in the middle. Okay, so they do this, and they end up having reasonably good results, particularly when they are backtesting this in a long short equity strategy. So here I offer you several results. The table here that I'm circling, the one at the top, it contains machine learning performance indicators like accuracy, precision, recall. Now, it doesn't seem that it is true that, yes, the ChatGPT seems to be offering almost the same results as the previous GPT models. Now, what does it mean? That even though they are very similar results, what is really a very positive outcome is that the timing of those signals seems to be very good, because when we are running that back testing, the returns for the next day returns by prediction score seems to be quite robust and superior to all the other metrics. Okay, so this is, and probably you are thinking the same as me right now. Okay, Carlos, but this is only a 1 year and 3 months sort of back testing. Are you going to put a lot of importance on here? No, these are only preliminary analysis. Okay, and probably another question from you is why the authors are not using this since 2001 or 2002. Why they are not running the whole analysis since early 2000s or something like that, no? Where we already have a lot of digital news, no? Digital text news, no? The reason is because they are afraid of look-ahead bias and overfitting in the model. Okay, as you know, the cutoff date of ChatGPT was 2021. I think it was September 2021. So what the authors do is like, we don't want to ask ChatGPT about sentiment of news of a piece of news of Coca-Cola for March 2013, because we believe that there's a possibility that future data filters into the present. Okay, so there's a possibility of look-ahead bias, that the algorithm is taking into account future data to inform the prediction, and that will mean that we are basing or long-short equity back testing in a bias model. So they prefer to run the model in 1 year and I think it's 3 months, that running in 20 years, knowing that there's a high probability that the model is completely, that this model basically is completely biased and the results are going to be all spurious. Okay, or too good to be true. Understood? So that's the main. I think that on the one hand, it's great that these couple of researchers, they came up with some preliminary analysis of how ChatGPT performs. On the other hand, take these results with a pinch of salt, because we cannot look back before 2021, because there's a risk of look-ahead bias. That will also, I'm going to address later, probably in the Q&A session. Let's go to the next one. Also, I just went through the first task, no, which is sentiment analysis news. So yes, we have reasonably good performance compared to other models like BERT models or GPT-1 and GPT-2. So ChatGPT is performing reasonably well, okay, but nothing out of this world either. Okay, let's go to SWOT and PESTEL analysis. How can that help us to run some qualitative analysis? And I want to give you a couple of, first thing first, I want to highlight the main limitations, okay, of working with ChatGPT from my experience. There are inherent biases, okay, because of, I show you, there's a reasonably big, I think it was that 60%, 80%, more than half of the data that ChatGPT is trained is with websites, no? That means that it includes blogs. It can include blogs that go from the far left to far right sort of ideologies. That means that it can come out with inherent biases in its output. Other things to bear in mind that it's a laggard. I'm going to show you an example of why the knowledge, if you want to call it like that, of ChatGPT finished in 2021. Anything that's happened since then, he is completely clueless. Hallucination, what does it mean? That he's an expert politician. He can really create fake information or create a speech that really favors the kind of topic he's talking about. And I'm going to also show you a couple of examples on why you shouldn't trust blindfoldedly ChatGPT. It's unitopic. The moment that you start like asking about different topics in the same conversation, the accuracy, precision, and recall of a ChatGPT falls apart. Okay, so it's very good always to keep the chat focus on a particular topic. We don't want to mix topics. If you're going to run PESTEL analysis on one chat, don't also ask for the SWOT analysis. Open a new chat and be specific in every chat for a specific topic. Legal and ethical issues. I don't have to tell you, probably you read a lot about this. There are many artists and writers. They are very, very, very disappointed because they know that their input has been used in these models. And as you know, there's a lot of now regulatory and legal outrage. Know that why are we not getting paid as artists when this particular AI model is generating these images with my input? No, so there's a lot of legal and ethical issues behind that. They are going to be, that's going to be a huge debate within the next decade. Laziness. ChatGPT will give you the output that in the format that he wishes, unless you specify what kind of format you want for the output, as I'm going to show you now. A lack of consistency, no? You can ask the same question, but ChatGPT can answer very differently. There's a way you open the Python or OpenAI library, there's an argument that allows you to lower the degree of, increase the degree of consistency in the answers, which is the temperature. And again, that's too technical. I don't want to go there. I'm going to show you some snippets later, but I want to first focus on the cases, no? For instance, in this particular chat, no, I'm asking ChatGPT, can you write a Python program that recommends to sell a company based on the country of incorporation? Please provide an example. And then the high-risk countries, I highlight in red here, the high-risk countries that ChatGPT provides are Iran, North Korea, Syria, and Venezuela. So inherently, there's a bias there towards considering these countries dangerous, high risk, even though, quite frankly, the only thing I'm doing is telling them from a point of view of economics perspective of if a company is going to be in a better place or not, country of incorporation, why is not including, for instance, the UK? ChatGPT is aware of what is happening in the UK with Brexit, no? Inevitably, that has created a lot of economic uncertainty. Why is not adding the UK into this list, no? For instance, so now inherently, ChatGPT comes with a lot of biases, okay? And that's why it needs, for the time being, a lot of human supervision. That particular is a problem if you are creating marketing documents, because that can create a marketing problem, okay, and a PR problem for the company you are working for. A laggard. So why it's a laggard? Because I asked him, what was the problem with Silicon Valley Bank? And ChatGPT is answering me that, well, I don't know what you're talking about, that Silicon Valley Bank is a prominent bank that primarily serves startups and so on. So ChatGPT doesn't even know what has happened in March this year, because as I mentioned, it finishes, the knowledge, its knowledge finishes in September 2021, okay? Let's continue. Fake information, AKA hallucination. So sometimes it's good when we are researching things like, okay, so I want to enhance my value factor investment methodology. Can you give me some research papers on value investing? That's why I ask here in this basic topic query. There's a lot of materials on value investing online. So ChatGPT is answering me with 4 or 5 papers. The first 4, they exist. They do exist, okay? And the authors and the title of the papers, they're actually accurate. But when I was checking the 5th one, it turns out that the authors are not, he's inventing the authors. Now, The authors, Cliff for Asnes, it's a real author, but that paper is not linked to that author. Okay, so it's making up. When it's a basic topic, you can rely more or less in the output. Now, when I ask a more complex research query, can you give me research in the right table? Can you provide research paper on the use of stock options information to predict stock returns? He made up all the papers and all the authors here, all of them. Okay, so I was checking and double checking title of the research, author, year, none of them exist. Even if you ask for a URL link, the URL links are gonna give you a wrong or inexistent web address. Okay, so yes, ChatGPT is very prone to make up things. Laziness, the same thing. Here on the left, I'm asking about biotech industry long-term growth drivers. Please provide me with some information. And it gives me all these 3 paragraphs. Now, maybe I want the data more structured so that I can make sense of it quicker, no? And that's why you need to provide a much more narrow and specific query prompt. Like, for instance, can you give me an intro about the biotech industry, including the long-term growth drivers and expected revenue growth for the next 5 years? Naming sources and providing the text structure in tabular format. And as you can see, we have something that is much better structure, more user-friendly. But we need to be aware of that. Okay. Lack of consistency. What I was talking about. I'm asking the same question in the left and on the right, and I have different answers. Now, there's a parameter we can manipulate in the OpenAI library of Python in order to make this happen less, because it still happens. And yeah, some prompt tips I give you. Please be clear, concise, and specific when writing your prompts. Okay, keep one topic per conversation always. Provide the necessary context. If you can provide examples, the better. Request a desired length of the answer. Specify the desired format. If you want in the table format, provide table format. If you want in tabular data, provide, please, I want the output in tabular data. Otherwise, ChatGPT is going to ignore you. Provide corrections within a conversation. Sometimes ChatGPT can get it wrong. If you write a correction in the conversation and you re-ask the question, ChatGPT is going to be able to correct itself, and it's going to enhance the whole conversation. If you're going to use a conversation only for SWOT analysis, you're going to see the gains, the marginal gains in future queries. And last but not least, use proper grammar when writing the prompts. And I'm a sinner because, as you have seen probably before, I made a couple of mistakes, okay, because I was in a rush. So it's always good to check your grammar and don't follow my example in that sense. And another usage of ChatGPT as a summarizer. Okay, now as a summarizer, not only of text, because it turns out that when I'm asking this question, provide fundamental analysis insights based on the next financial data. Okay, it turns out that if you provide in this kind of tabular data information, ChatGPT is able to describe the trends. It's able to tell you the company debt to equity is going up or down in time, if the return equity is increasing or decreasing. So if you have repetitive tasks at the office, because maybe we know how red tape and bureaucracy works, sometimes they're asking us for very boring, yeah, I know that it's not important, but you have to do this. ChatGPT can help you to assuage that pain, okay? So it helps me a lot in terms of monitoring tasks, reduce my work overload. And as a code helper, I have to tell you, that the same table I was asking ChatGPT, can you please give me a 2x2 chart for this data with the code in Python, and it does it for you. And this is great because you can save probably 90 or 80% of the coding time if you have coding skills. I, quite frankly, this year I've been more productive than ever because of that. Now, that doesn't mean that the code is going to be perfect. I identify a lot of times where the code contains issues, but I promise you that if ChatGPT gives you the gives you the skeleton of the code you need to write. The tweaks are going to be very quick and very easy. Okay. And yes, and this is the SWOT and PESTEL analysis I was talking about. No. So what do we have here? That we can use ChatGPT for many purposes. Okay. When we are investors, when we are conducting equity research, we can ask ChatGPT for internal and external factors that impact an organization. That's what we do with the SWOT and PESTEL. We can ask ChatGPT for analyzing data. That's what I did with the return on equity, debt to equity data. It can also facilitate brainstorming. Sometimes I run out of ideas and I'm asking ChatGPT, give me some ideas about this. And it can give you some ideas that later you can verify online. Okay. And also very useful for me, it has been that it has allowed me to automate a lot of my qualitative analysis. Okay. I'm going to give you an example of this. I'm using ChatGPT every month. For instance, my equity screens gives me between 10 and 20 candidates, no? To likely possibilities of investment, no? I run some quantamental scoring. Maybe from those 20, 25, I go down to 7 to 8. I can automate now the qualitative analysis for those six to 8 new candidates. So in a moment, I'm generating a lot of qualitative analysis that in the past, for 8 companies, if that was the first time I was analyzing a company, it was a very time-consuming task, especially when it was a company belonging to an industry I never researched before, for instance. Okay? So we are talking about that you can save, if it's a brand new company in a brand new industry you never researched, probably to run qualitative analysis the first time can take you from 3 to 4 days. Okay, I'm adding up reading, I'm writing a SWOT analysis and PESTEL analysis. Now, if you are using now ChatGPT, that can go from 3 to 4 days to 1 to 2 days or even 1 morning. You have previous experience in that research, in that industry and that company. Okay, so that's a lot of productivity gains. Okay. Good. So what did I do here? I've done that PESTEL. I'm running a PESTEL analysis and give you some snippets of a very simple program. So we have here that I'm importing the OpenAI library. And if you want to use the OpenAI library, I'm asking, somebody here is asking me, are these examples from the free version or the paid one? Yeah, the free version. Now, for all of you, the free version is freely available in the website of ChatGPT. But this programmatic access with the OpenAI library, you have to go to the OpenAI website, request an API key, okay? Feed the API key to the OpenAI library, as I do here. And when you do this, the moment that you request the API key, you are only going to have 1 month free usage. Okay? So after that 1 free month, yes, the Python code is available for free, no problem whatsoever. I mean, you can check it out later. I think Katerina will send the presentation, or the video is going to be available. That's not going to be a problem. The main problem here is what I told you. The moment that you are requesting the API key, because you want to use this code snippet, the time starts counting, and you only have 1 month, unless there's a new offer from OpenAI that now they are giving you 3 months for free or something like that. But you only have to practice for free 1 month. So if you're going to do it, be conscious that you're only going to have 1 month for free. Okay. Later on, if you want to keep on having access, you're going to have to pay. Understood? Great. So let's continue now, because I want to go through this very quickly. I just simply wanted to give you the overview of what I did. I created here, after accessing the OpenAI library, I'm able to generate a user-defined function that is going to basically give me the output from the ChatGPT model. Okay. So here what I do is to write a name variable, the Coca-Cola company, and a ticker variable. So I'm writing 4 queries. I was experimenting with 4 queries. The first 2 queries are using the name of the company, the Coca-Cola company. And the last 2 queries are using the ticker of the company. Okay. In the first query, I'm simply asking for a PESTEL analysis using the acronym PESTEL. In the second query, I'm using the whole wording: political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal analysis of impacting, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So I'm trying to come up, and I'm afraid I don't have enough time to go through all the details, but I was trying to come up with different queries to see how the PESTEL analysis changes from one company to the, from one query to the other for Coca-Cola. And these are the results, which also are going to be available if you access the presentation. But I'm going to jump into what were the key takeaways. And these key takeaways are not only from this analysis with Coca-Cola, are from analyzing a lot of stocks and also from checking third-party research. Okay. Some tips for investors running this kind of PESTEL SWOT analysis: avoid ticker nomenclatures, because I suffer sometimes that the ChatGPT gets crazy. Okay. And it gets crazy because sometimes for popular tickers like Apple or Microsoft, it recognizes them, but for others, it doesn't recognize those tickers, or it gets confused with another nomenclature that means something different. Acronyms efficiency varies. Yes, sometimes acronyms like PESTEL or SWOT are very well known, are very recognizable by ChatGPT, but there are other acronyms that maybe it gets lost. So be careful with that, please. Narrow the context. Remember what I did? I'm asking for PESTEL analysis or relevant factors for the next years in this particular format. So I'm always narrowing my query so that I want ChatGPT to do exactly to produce an exact output. RPG, you can tell ChatGPT, play the role of an economist, play the role of an equity research analyst, and give me the PESTEL for blah, blah, blah. That's also something that is going to narrow the knowledge standpoint of ChatGPT. So that's going to give you more accurate results. Chain prompting, if you have a very complex task, please break it down. Don't ask PESTEL and SWOT in the same prompt. Allocate PESTEL for one prompt and SWOT for another prompt in different conversations. Provide sample answers when as much as you can. If you're going to run the SWOT analysis of Coca-Cola, maybe you have a SWOT analysis of Pepsi that you can feed the algorithm first. And that is going to allow the algorithm to understand what are the requirements it has to fill. Output format, I say that, please specify the format that you want, if you want in a table format or bullet points or whatever. And human supervision, always, and double check, always, especially this kind of qualitative analysis, okay? You had to double check. There was, not for PESTEL, but for the SWOT analysis, I remember, I think it was Coca-Cola as well, where in the SWOT analysis in weaknesses, because Coca-Cola belongs to consumer staples, no? So what probably ChatGPT was thinking, it was giving me a weakness of Coca-Cola, the brand value. And we all know, we are all aware that Coca-Cola brand value is not particularly a weakness of the company, it's just the opposite. But probably ChatGPT was connecting the dots that, okay, consumer staple companies, particularly in beverage, maybe they have a quite a homogeneous, standardized product, no? Because mostly it's food, beverage. So maybe the algorithm doesn't relate that to a high brand value, because Coca-Cola maybe is a huge exception there. So I'm telling you this because, yes, for SWOT and PESTEL, maybe ChatGPT is going to save you a lot of time. It saves me a lot of time, but that doesn't mean that I ignore and I don't reread things. I always double check and triple check the output, and it allows me to really add value, because in the past I used to have to run the whole and write the whole analysis. Now I can only focus on the parts that actually make a lot of sense. For instance, if you are running SWOT analysis, and probably ChatGPT gives you SWOT analysis, you have checked the fundamentals of the company and is speaking in margins, probably one of the risks are going to be that there's a risk of deterioration in margins because the company is speaking in margins. No, that might or might not be a risk or a weakness in the analysis of ChatGPT. So there's always things that you can complement into ChatGPT, even though it's going to give you quite a reasonable output when we are running this kind of analysis. And I think that I'm done. So thank you for surviving my presentation. Okay. And I'm more than open to have any questions if we still have time. Sorry about the overtime.
Carlos, I think it's not that we survived. We enjoyed a lot your presentation, and thank you, for covering different aspects from describing the training data set, the sources, some of the characteristics of the data, and going to very specific use cases. I will start with the question. I think it's a kind of Christoph, Igor, and actually I have the same question. So we know that ChatGPT is good at making things up. And you mentioned this hallucination effect. So my question is, and you showed us the example of fake authors articles. So my question is, what does lead? What does lead to this hallucination effect? What is wrong in the training, or whether you think it can be fixed? That's the first part. And the second part, can it be used for making up stories to tailwind pricing of equities? To have kind of fake news, and and very practical questions. Have Reddit users applied it in this manner, as far as you know?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the hallucination effect, I think is we all forget, and also because there's a lot of hysteria in the news and in the media, that there's a lack of real knowledge of the GPT models, okay? So I want to clarify that, because everybody's using the term artificial intelligence as if, especially for ChatGPT, and the only thing that GPT models are doing, okay, is they are only expanding the input you provide. Okay, probabilistically speaking, you are providing some words and some context, and he is using the whole architecture and the whole data is fed with to find the most highly probabilistically output based on your context you provide. Okay, but it's not trying to challenge what you are cannot challenge basically itself. It's trying always to adapt to whatever you are giving it. And I probably have read a lot of articles and blogs where there are a lot of people that are making ChatGPT to fail with logic questions, so that the algorithm is contradicting itself. In fact, I did it in, you read the last article I wrote in this. I made the machine to basically contradict itself, and later even apologizes to you, which is quite funny. Okay, so but what I'm trying to tell you here is that the model is more concerned about generating output that is contextually relevant, okay, for the kind of prompt you provided, that concern about giving you the right answer. That's the reason why there's a danger, because the answer can be incorrect or even fake, as I showed you before, so always remember, I mean, it's not that I'm underestimating the power of GPT models. I simply consider there are a lot of things that we call nowadays artificial intelligence that are only machine learning. That's it, okay? So apologies if I let down somebody, but again, that's my opinion. There are more clever people out there in machine learning research that maybe they have a different opinion than me, but for the time being, that's my opinion. Now, the second question you asked me about, can we use these to basically produce fake content? Yes, there's a huge risk, and that's why we had that testimony in front of the Congress, of OpenAI. In the same fashion, we have a lot of problems with fake news coming from social media companies like Twitter or Facebook 6-7 years ago, with that elections scandal and everything that is supposed to manipulate the electorate. We are right now in the same crossroad right now. There can be a lot of content that can be generated online automatically that can be fake, okay, and can provide even more misinformation to not only investors for investment purposes, but overall topics like medical advice, which is even worse. Okay, so can the purpose of ChatGPT be perverted? Of course.
Yeah, I think that's funny, and also there are tools which can generate voice. You mentioned this Congress hearing about the regulation, and I remember this starting speech of the congressman, which was generated by the AI. He told, like, please start the meeting as if you were me to one of the tools. And yeah, that's really, but how do we ensure the correctness? How do we check the information?
Number one, we are, and probably regulation pressure is going to force these companies, these private and public organizations that are conducting research on large language models, to not only improve the performance of those models in terms of accuracy and precision, but also meet certain standards of ethics and information privacy and so on. I think that that's something that is going to take probably the whole decade to regulate, or even more, quite frankly. But that's probably the way that we're going to see things going. So that's in terms of, that will be the passive way of how we can solve that problem. What is the active way we as users can we solve that problem? Number one, follow the tips I enumerated in the presentation of be concise in your prompts and try to narrow the context as much as possible. Provide an array of examples before you ask the actual prompt. And never forget, please double check, use human supervisors, especially for that output that is going to be very sensitive, because maybe it's going to be released in a note to your investors or in marketing products.
I think you're just, confirming one of the quotes. I don't remember from whom. I could have asked ChatGPT, but that giving answers is easy. The difficult part is to ask questions. To know how to formulate questions. Yeah. It's not only about ChatGPT, but all the things. Talking about the regulation as something which we can hopefully rely on in future for the correctness. What do you think? But there are different kinds of regulations. One is about the models itself, correctness, use of data, maybe some others don't come to my mind. But what kind of regulation you are waiting for? What do you think is the most important at this stage?
I think that there are several verticals in regulation. There's a vertical for users, so that when we are using ChatGPT, we are not concerned about compromising information. Especially, I think that what the example I gave you about private bankers inputting client-sensitive information because they want to generate a report for the client, no? Now, that client-sensitive information can leak, no? In the database of OpenAI, and that a hacker can access that, and all of a sudden it's got confidential information leaked, no? That would be the vertical of the users, no? How can regulate part? So that part is important, and that comes from especially their main regulator. It has to ensure that similar to the GDPR, no, data regulation in Europe, no, that the moment that there's a leak or a breach, the company reports that, and otherwise there's going to be a fine that is like 2 to 4% of the total sales of the company. That is going to increase the willingness of the large language model companies that research these kind of models to increase their security, the investment in security, in internal security, and ensure that the models are not leaking private information. Okay, and there are other also verticals that I think are going to be even more important, especially as we are heading towards that singularity moment of living along with the machines, no? And as the machines are getting better and better at things that we do. One of them is what I was discussing as well, which is very concerning. A lot of artists and a lot of writers, they have seen that their output, no, the paintings they produce, the films they produce, the books they write, all this is input into these kind of algorithms that they are not getting paid at all. So another vertical of regulation has to be how OpenAI has to reward. OpenAI is going to have to open the books of the data he's using. That data has to be classified so that we can track the origin. We can track who is the author of that particular image or that particular text that is used. And probably OpenAI is going to have to pay a royalty to those input providers. But again, this is science fiction, a lot of regulation coming, but that's what I think makes more sense. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of social outrage, particularly from the part of the creatives. No?
Yeah, a lot of things. I have questions about private data, but let me ask from the chat. I think you showed example of sentiment analysis of the news. Do you have any examples, or what is the output of conference call transcripts analysis? And how
Yeah, I
often do
think
you
that,
use it? Yeah, that's maybe.
yeah, that exactly. At the moment, and that's what I was talking about, no? Even the economics I show you of models, I've checked all the last couple of weeks recent research on that. The community is always coming up with new models to cheapen, no?
Yes.
The way we can use large language models. So it's incredible the pace. And in terms of where I am in terms of using ChatGPT, because of the look ahead bias also I was talking about before, I'm more interested right now in using ChatGPT for increasing productivity of my tools than in running back testing, because I have problems with that. Now, conference call transcripts, yes, I've used it, and I use it in that slide I mentioned about summarizing. It allows me. I used to spend a lot of time in the Q&A. Okay, and I think it's very good to use for conference call transcripts. You can plug it by sections. Otherwise, there's going to be a limit in the prompt of the number of characters. But you can, especially the Q&A research, tell us this is the one that provides more value. Okay, and you can copy paste into ChatGPT the text of the transcript of the questions and answers section, and you can ask, please summarize the key points, and it's going to give you quite an edge in terms of productivity. Again, can we run the same kind of, for instance, I wrote along with another partner of mine, I wrote an article with some backtesting of an NLP strategy running sentiment analysis on conference call transcripts, but not using ChatGPT. We were using other more standard models, no? Because we can backtest that. Because of the problems I mentioned before, we can I cannot still backtest something, not even news, because I could do it, but I'm going to be doing something similar to what those authors I mentioned before, no, with 1 year and something of data. So for me at the moment, doesn't make any sense.
Okay, I see. I remember I have been running to the software engineers here and say, "Oh, I think we need to use artificial intelligence for this purpose." They looked at me without any enthusiasm, said like, "Your task is simple. You should not involve AI. It's just rule-based algorithm. That's easy." So I think there is this hype, and non-technical people tend to say everything is AI, as you told, but it's not. Yeah.
That's like using a slammer's hedge to kill a fly, no? It's the same thing.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, there's another anecdote with data science and machine learning happens that sometimes people tell me, Carlos, I want to do, I don't know, a chart with 10 data points, no? And how can I do that in Python? Why don't you try Excel? It's 10 data points, and you don't have to do any kind of data transformation. So I think every tool is good for a particular task, no? And when you have big data, yes, indeed, you're going to need something more than Excel.
Yeah, that's. But maybe when you have a history of using ChatGPT, and this is our topic, so were any cases where you were surprised and basically said, "Oh, I didn't thought about it. I didn't think about it. That was a great input from ChatGPT." Wow, moments.
Yeah, no, what I mentioned. Yeah, I think it's good for brainstorming, because sometimes I'm going to tell you something. Sometimes we have a particular anchoring bias. So maybe I'm following a company, but it was like 1.5 years or something like that. Or maybe I covered a company, but I stopped following that company for a particular reason. And I'm familiar with the story of the company, but 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and I'm no longer familiar with it. No, so sometimes ChatGPT can give you some things that has happened with that company that I didn't realize about that. Okay, so it can change. It can give you it's a good tool for brainstorming, because it can give you out of the box ideas that you wouldn't think about on your own. Okay, and again, there's a risk that ChatGPT is bullshitting. Yes, but the idea is there. It's giving you that idea, and it's your duty to go and verify the idea first and dig further if it's a good idea.
Yes, a partner to talk with, to run your idea. I think here it's also a question regarding the analysis, like Dmitry is challenging, how you can use PESTEL analysis if ChatGPT is based on the data up to September 21?
Very good question. And it's because you need to be aware of that. And you have to be specifically asking for the next years. So it's gonna take the data of the threshold, no? But there's a danger, and the danger is that it can give you a output that is outdated. So that's why I'm always telling the people, it's not a silver bullet. You have to verify the output. And PESTEL analysis or SWOT analysis running with the ChatGPT is gonna make 80% of your job, not 100%. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example of this.
And that's good. That means we have
yeah,
jobs, right?
exactly. So far,
Yes,
in 20
so
years,
far.
I don't know. Okay,
Yeah.
but my point is that I'm gonna give you a very quick example of this. By the way, it was Coca-Cola. Yes, when it was as well. It was giving me an idea in terms of this company is opportunity expanding into Asia. Okay, now that was when you verify that as a human being, you realize that that was a big driver of the company in 2002, 2005. But by the time, by today's standards, the company has already penetrated Asia. It's already established there. Okay, so there's no way you're going to see more growth coming from there. That was a huge growth driver, a huge opportunity 20 years ago. Because remember, ChatGPT maybe got that idea for the SWOT analysis from a piece of text or something from 2007, 2006, 2004. You see where I'm going, no? So even if we need to be aware that it's not enough to read and okay, makes sense. No, regrettably, you need to verify. Now, the good news is that probably you will agree with me that it takes much less time to verify information than to research, read a lot, research, shortlist information, write it, summarize and write in a document. So that's what I'm telling you. It's gonna make 75, 80% of your job. It's not gonna make. It's gonna be doing 100% of the job.
You know, I have not tried, but maybe you know. So you're asking, for example, the main drivers of the company, and then you can, in the same chat, you can input the new financial results or some new parameters, right? And I think ChatGPT will be able to combine this information or not.
Yeah, that's what I did before in that slide I mentioned, where I'm simply asking, I have this tabular data with the fundamental ratios. No, can you give me a description of the trends? Now, you could have told them many more. Can you please give me a description of the trends, the maximum and minimums? And so you can you can provide financial data, and it can basically analyze. When it's a simple task, it can do it. When it's not a simple task, it can make mistakes. But if it's about trends, changes, things like that, it should be able to provide an accurate output.
Just to think a comment for everyone. Yeah, it is trained up to September 21, but you can input the new data. Yeah, to ease in your work.
Yeah, you can always do it if you are running your own research model. If you are training, so you can using transfer learning. That's why I was talking about the economics of training the model. The big guys, what are they doing in asset management? They have the budget to, okay, let's get the model from ChatGPT, and we can fine tune it even further using more finance focused information. How many firms can do that? Very few in investment community. So what everybody else is waiting is for alternative data vendors and Bloomberg, for instance, to that Bloomberg GPT model to see more about that coming forward. It can be something that can be a strong contributor to the investment process, or maybe we discover that Bloomberg GPT model is not very good. So again, it's very early to judge the performance of the models, but I think that they are in the right path, as I showed before.
And do you think training the model just for internal purposes, let's say for the company to make better reports, to retrieve something from the database easily, you know, to say, okay, today I'm here, what are my tasks for today? So it's this kind of integration of ChatGPT in just your daily work without selling it out or basing your investment research. Is it also a tedious task and does it cost $1-2 million too?
No, because for every task you need to train the model. So, however, for generic tasks like the ones you are talking about, you can use the vanilla model. So my point is that is when we want to do a very finance specific task and we need a lot of accuracy and we need to really trust the output, that we really need to be careful about that. Now, for chatbots and things like that, banks are already using it, okay, in their chatbots applications. When you enter into your bank website, the chatbot that appears, probably most of them are now enhancing that with ChatGPT, okay? So it's already happening, but depending on the task within your financial institution, the model accuracy or the kind of requirements, we're going to be more or less demanding.
Okay. Yeah, we are. I think there is one more question about. Do you know about any difference between ChatGPT and AI offered by Google?
Yeah, I think that.
So Bart, yes.
Yeah, I think that Google has to provide much more information about that. And my advice for everybody in this room probably is that you're never going to be, and I'm including myself here, we're never going to be able to understand the latest technology. We have to be at least using the second or third level, the second or third update, okay? It can create a lot of frustration, and I'm talking about myself, because there's a new thing coming next week, and the week after, and the week after. Don't focus on being updated on the latest thing that comes. At least try to incorporate in your job. Even if you have right now using only Finbert or, I don't know, GPT-2, if at least that is inside your workflow, that's better than nothing, okay? Because if you're always trying to chase the latest fashion, it's going to be a frustration exercise, okay? And from my side, that's what I'm trying to tell you here, is that if still I know that there are problems with ChatGPT, I'm waiting for Bloomberg and other providers to come with very strong finance-specific models. And I know that backtesting is an issue. So I'm trusting my Finbert models, for instance, okay? We don't have to jump to the latest fashion only because it's the latest fashion. In fact, there are a lot of examples in history, in research, where the latest fashion, it turns out to be not the right path, okay? So we need to be patient, try to learn as much as you can, but don't frustrate with that. About BART, I'm the first one that I want to know more, but Google has not been as open as OpenAI and Microsoft about BART.
I think it's time to wrap up, but I'll ask you, as you started, as you mentioned, a rapidly growing technology space. So if generative models, they really, solidify their place in the investment management, do you think the investment management professionals of the future, what do they need to know? Do they need to have more technical knowledge, more empathy to people, or what kind of balance of the investment management profile we are looking for?
That depends on the kind of role that you have. I think that within the next decade, we're going to have more and more students coming to finance that they are almost data scientists, because at universities, they are taught Python coding skills and machine learning and data science skills. But a specialization later early in your career, whether you decide to be more front office professional, back office, middle office, engineer, or private banker, which is a client-facing role, that is going to determine the kind of skill set that you need. Inevitably, you need to be aware of the technological trends and have an intuitive knowledge of the technologies that are going to be implemented. But it's the same as if we go back in the 80s and we have spreadsheets coming. People stop using calculators. Sooner or later, university students start coming out of the university knowing Excel, And that was a shift in the early 90s, late 80s in the finance industry, where people stopped using HP calculators for running DCF models, okay? This is exactly the same kind of crossroad we are right now. And I think that for some people, for the people that have made an effort to catch up, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough probably for the people that are not making that effort to catch up. If they are lucky enough, they get retired, that's okay. But if there's a long way to retirement, I advise everybody to at least have an intuitive understanding of data science, machine learning, and the new trends like this one.
Yeah, I remember when I had to learn financial calculator for the CFA exam, but it was much easier in Excel.
All for
So
nothing.
all or nothing. Yeah, I'm just 20 minutes past 1 hour. I have many more questions, but I think we need to call it a day. Thank you so much, Carlos, for bringing up this topic, for sharing your knowledge. And I would highly recommend to everyone on this call to subscribe to LinkedIn of Carlos Salas and read articles there. You will get more in-depth knowledge. And as you can see, this is first-hand knowledge of our peer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure. I would like to thank again the CFA Ukraine for the kind invitation, and hopefully it has been fruitful for the attendants, and happy to be coming back in the future. Okay, so thank you very much for having me.
Agree. Looking forward.
Bye-bye.
Bye.